Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. This episode has been brought to you by the Wine to Wine Business Forum 2022. This year will mark the 9th edition of the forum to be held on November 7th and 8th of 2022 in Verona, Italy. This year will be an exclusively in-person edition. The main theme of the event will be all-round wine communication. Tickets are on sale now, so for more information, please visit us at winetowine.net.
Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm Cynthia Chaplin, and this is Voices. Every Wednesday, I will be sharing conversations with international wine industry professionals, discussing issues in diversity, equity, and inclusion through their personal experiences working in the field of wine. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate our show wherever you get your pods.
Hello, and welcome to Voices. Today, I'm really happy to welcome Mandy Oser. She is the owner of Ardesia Wine Bar in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, where she's highlighting a lot of lesser known and underappreciated people in our industry, including women-led wine brands and wines that give back to charity, sort of unknown wine regions, and unusual or unique winemaking techniques, which are always very exciting and often get left off more traditional wine lists. Mandy was a keynote speaker in the 2022 Women in Wine Leadership Symposium, and she was recently named one of Wine Enthusiast's Future 40. So congratulations, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's a huge pleasure and always fun for me to talk to somebody from New York, and it's been a while since I've been back there. So great to have you today. And I just want to take a look at some background because I've been reading up. I'm a big stalker, as most of my guests have discovered. And back in the day when you were a student, you were a paralegal. So I want to know what happened, what sparked this move away from law and got you into hospitality, because they are very different.
They are indeed. I always kind of had a foot in restaurants and food and worked in restaurants from teenage years on through college. Always thought it was going to be a side thing, although it was always a really abiding passion. I always tell the story. I think I was 7 or 8 and I asked to have my birthday party at the quote unquote hot new restaurant in town, which I think my parents allowed me to do, which was really funny.
Oh, nice parents.
Well, hot is relative in suburban New Jersey, but in any event, I was pursuing a career in politics and law, and after graduating from Kenyon College, I landed in DC and worked on Capitol Hill for a few years, and then was sort of making my moves to prepare to go to law school and took a job as a paralegal, and just quickly realized it wasn't for me. It was very interesting, and I actually learned skills that I use today. I know my way around an Excel spreadsheet thanks to the good folks that trained me at that law firm. But it was something, I don't know, about the pace. It was, and I think I really crave sort of seeing the result of my work a lot faster than you sometimes do in the world of law. And at that point, I just kind of hit pause. I said, let me figure out what I really want to do. And like a lot of people in their mid-20s, a lot of people kind of, if you don't have a really strong path already in place, it's a good time to reassess. And that's what I did, and kept coming back to the idea of food, wine, and that world, and started searching for something that I could do that felt like a long-term kind of thing. And that's, when I made the jump, it was about 5 years out of college. And I can certainly talk more about that aspect as well, what I ended up doing.
That is amazing. I think, first of all, hello to another Ohio girl. I'm from Ohio, but
oh, nice.
I think so many of us have that sort of, especially people who are a little bit older to the wine world rather than newer, that experience of being on one track. I was doing psychology, and then discovering that for whatever reason, as you said, didn't like the speed of it, the results. I was kind of the same. Also the kind of endless pressure.
What I had done was I took a job as the assistant to Eric Ripert, who's the chef and owner of Le Bernardin restaurant in New York, and quite honestly, at the time, I barely knew who he was. It just seemed interesting. My family was back in New York. I thought it was a great way to kind of get back closer to them. And, at the time, and then the role grew over the years. I was with him for almost a decade. But it's interesting to me, even in that time, just the people I met kind of in those behind the scenes professional roles in hospitality, it kind of grew as the interest in chefs and restaurants grew culturally. So I think actually today, if one like myself were kind of exploring, quote unquote, what to do in this industry, there'd be a lot more options. But then it was a lot more just touch and go, build it as you go. So I think it's interesting how that aspect has evolved and how it might be different today if one were declaring that they want to be in hospitality.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think it's seen as a really legitimate career at this point and having a lot of different branches. You don't have to be a chef or a sommelier. There's a lot. You ended up being director of strategic partnerships with Eric, which is, not sort of a job that people think about when they think about hospitality, but it's an important one. So what were you doing at that point?
Back, it's 2003 when I joined Le Bernardin, and even just family friends, and, no one sort of understood what I was doing. They would say, oh, do you do the ordering for the restaurant? Are you a waiter? And I just knew I wanted something more. I didn't necessarily want to be on the floor full time. And so, what it was it really grew as the business grew and as Chef Repair's sort of outside work grew with things like cookbooks, and developed a TV show. And so even some of my legal training, as it were, came into play because there were a lot of contracts, and I would sort of be the first person to throw an eye on those. And also Chef Repair and all of the Bernardin have a big emphasis on philanthropy. And so one of the great aspects of the job was I was sort of the liaison with the organizations he supported outside of the restaurant. And that was extremely rewarding. And so as the role grew and touched more and more aspects, then, the title grew as well. And we kind of created that title. And what's funny is now I see that, when I first sort of ascended to that title, it was a bit new. And, some people would be like, what do you do? What is that? But now I see that all the time.
Yeah. Is that a made up thing? Exactly.
It was, but now I see it all the time. I saw another celebrity chef. I saw an interface with one of his people, and their title was chief of staff. And I was like, yes, I love this, and it really has sort of just evolved and professionalized. And there are a lot more layers to these organizations, especially the bigger hospitality groups. But, even at the small ones, the functions and the need for that support remains. So it's opened a lot of doors for sort of non-floor, non-culinary based roles in this world.
Yeah, and I think it reflects sort of as I said, the legitimization of hospitality as a career, and all of the extra things that can take place within, that realm. As you said, not just being on the floor, but and not just having a restaurant, but actually doing a lot of community outreach and finding other ways to connect with other things. So
totally.
It sounds like you had an awesome gig there. So what kind of made you decide you were going to open Ardesia and go it on your own?
Yeah, well, I will say it was a total dream job. I loved, and that, in contrast to sort of what I was leaving behind, it was the kind of job where no 2 days were the same. The pace was really fast paced. We'd have an idea and we'd be able to just go ahead and execute it. So I loved that. I loved all the different types of people I was able to interact with. I'm also a French speaker, so I love getting to practice my okay French from time to time. But, there is a sense, sort of, Eric Repair is a little different than some of the other chefs like Daniel Bloude or Jean-Georges who are real expansionists. And Chef Repair is really focused on Le Bernardin and nurturing it. And he, has just created a lifestyle that's more New York based. And so there, as time went on, then some of the responsibilities and things I did started to repeat. And then it started to feel a little, not as fresh. And so I knew there weren't going to be, this was going to be the job, and it would sort of plateau at a certain point.
Yeah.
And for me, the reason I went there and changed my whole life was because I wanted, something super dynamic. And I had always kind of had this little quiet desire to have my own place in the back of my mind. And then it just sort of...
I think we all have that. You were brave.
Yeah. But it started gelling, and the passion for wine was something that developed over the years there. I studied sort of on my own, tried to absorb as much as I could on site, even though that wasn't obviously my primary function. And then it just slowly came together, and then it just felt like the right moment to make the jump. And one thing I will say that's something I've learned from Chef Bernardo is just he's such a nurturer of people's passions and talents, and he 100% supported my dreams, even though that meant I would be leaving his organization. So I think that's something that's really stuck with me as well, that it's like, give the people the support, you're going to get the most out of them while they're with you. And then that relationship just is lifelong. So that was a really beautiful aspect.
It's so amazing, the difference that having a mentor like that you trust and who trusts you at that point in your life and in your career, the difference that can make in terms of your self-confidence and and your courage, and you're willing to kind of
right.
see your dreams and think, yeah, I can probably do that. So I want to talk about Ardesia now because I'm obsessed. And the next time I'm in New York, I'm definitely coming to see you. But I'm curious about the name, first of all, because I know it means slate, which is described, as I'm quoting from my research, a natural and mysterious material with a minimalist color and structure, a dark gray material that can be split into thin layers. So I want to know, how did this appeal to you? Where did you come up with Ardesia? It's a very cool name.
Well, I love that definition. I've actually never read that specific definition. I love that. But
no lie, it's 3 definitions crammed together, but I liked the wording.
I'm going to steal that for my own edification. We actually originally had thought about naming it Slate. We liked the idea of blank slate, and that we could sort of have a canvas that would allow us to evolve over the years. And then actually the name Slate was taken already by a billiards hall that I think is still open in New York City, which I think ended up being a blessing in disguise, because I think, then we sort of just started looking for names that we really liked the sound of. And then we researched slate in other languages, and in French and in other languages, it's just it's ardoise in French, and it sounds French. We wanted something that didn't have any connotation, so that there wasn't an expectation of, oh, this is a French wine bar or an Italian wine bar, because Ardesia, even though it's Italian, to me, it didn't sound expressly Italian, because that wasn't going to be our vibe. And we wanted something that we could really allow us to play and build and evolve, and something really neutral in a sense, but beautiful. And we just landed on Ardesia. It took a long time. Naming things is really hard. That was probably the least fun aspect of building the place. But yeah, once we kind of landed on it, we fell in love with it, and haven't looked back. And then we kind of incorporated it into the design. So we have a monumental chalk wall where we write all the wines and some of the food, and then the floors are slate. So it's a little bit of a design element that we put in place as well.
I saw all of that in my stocking, which really impressed me, because obviously it's not just a name for you. You've incorporated it, as you said, in the design and kind of in the ethos of what you're doing there. I spent several years living very near a slate quarry in the northwest of England. So it really appeals to me. And I love the idea that you've created this name, which kind of was, a difficult delivery to get there. But then it's not just a name. You're not just rubber stamping it. It's really become part of who you are. And I really appreciate that. And while you've been there, you've gained this incredible reputation for championing these wines that are not on all the usual lists, as I said before, especially wines from female-led wineries, which is a passion of mine. and wine from unknown places. I live in a country where a lot of our best wines, not many people know about, so I like it when people are doing that. And wines that are using unusual techniques. So what got you interested in focusing on these kind of, as you called them, underappreciated and lesser known kind of wines? What drives your choices? Where do you go hunting for these wines?
Well, I think it kind of all works together, right? So we had this place that we wanted to have kind of a blank canvas. And then I think it really ties in with the fact that I didn't come up as a traditional floor somm, and I've kind of brought just my curiosity to the table. And so, a lot of these choices and selections are driven by things that I just personally find interesting. I also think, you see, what is the point of having the same thing on every list? Because then you can, what is the point of coming to us? So I just felt like when people come to us, we should, we don't want people to feel intimidated. So we always have things that are familiar as well and recognizable. And, for the person who just kind of wants to plop down and have a cold, crisp glass of Sauvignon Blanc, we've got you covered. But then I just had a sense, especially over the years, more and more that I think the larger wine drinking community is just more and more curious and more open. We opened in 2009, and from 2009 to now, it's definitely been a sea change in terms of, I think, openness to lesser known regions, and certainly a greater interest in thinking about the, where the wine is coming from, who's behind the wine. When we do highlight a special producer, I just see the excitement, when it's, oh, and by the way, it's a female producer, or, we've been pouring the wines of Aslina, who's South Africa's first.
Oh, I love her.
Yes. I mean, just a wonderful person. And it's just a joy to get to share those stories, because I think the average wine consumer, if they're walking into their neighborhood shop, that, they're maybe going to go for something familiar. When they come to us, this is where they can kind of play and discover something new. And so in terms of sourcing, it's a mixture. It's can be travel. It's a lot, just we've developed such a wonderful core of wine vendors that we work with. And, they kind of have, it's almost like I have one of them who says, oh, I have a really Ardesia wine for you. So then, I think we've almost gotten them to understand what we're looking for. And so we can be really lucky that sometimes it's brought to us in a sense. But yeah, and then through a combination of reading and just tasting things at other places. And it's a combination of all those things, and then kind of bringing it together in a cohesive fashion. Because I always say, we don't want things on the list that are unusual just for the sake of being unusual. Like they need to be delicious. They need to be well made, and then again, really looking now even beyond that, and what are the practices of the vineyard, what's going on behind the scenes. I think just everyone has gotten more interested in the total picture, and it can be hard. These are far-flung places, so it's really relying on research and talking to our vendors and a mixture of things. But it's bottom line is it's really about curiosity and discovery.
Are you enjoying this podcast? Don't forget to visit our YouTube channel, Mama Jumbo Shrimp, for fascinating videos covering Stevie Kim and her travels across Italy and beyond, meeting winemakers, eating local foods, and taking in the scenery.
It sounds like a fantastic approach, and one that I really, really, really like, because you've clearly created a space where people feel comfortable asking questions, trying something new. They're not going to get judged if they don't know what it is. And I think a lot of that comes down to communication, not using our very old-fashioned kind of outdated wine language and wine regions. As you said, why have the same thing as everyone else when the world is becoming more aware of wines from other places, both domestically and outside of the US. So I'm just wondering how you communicate all this, great stuff that you've learned, like Nikki Bailla's wine at Aslina and things. How are you communicating these wines that a lot of your customers probably haven't been exposed to? Is that written in your wine list, or is your staff uber trained and they can talk about this without using words like terroir and things like that put people off? How are you getting that out?
Well, I think that's key, actually. And because I was thinking about, how do we create a welcoming environment and one that's not intimidating. And I think language is a big part of it. Trying to avoid showing off with big sommelier words. And, one thing I always ask the staff is to never correct someone if they're mispronouncing something. It's just not necessary. And I think it makes people feel not good about themselves. So we try to do that. And then, always pouring little tastes if people are unsure. I mean, I think that is just the simplest and the best way to gauge, and then it creates this connection as well, because then it starts a conversation.
That's so true. In an ice cream shop, you a little taste if you don't know what it is. You don't have to commit to the entire cone. So,
exactly.
But most wine bars and restaurants will not do that. So I think that's a really generous and open approach to get people, kind of reeled into some new wines and feeling able to taste without committing to a bottle or even a whole glass.
I love that ice cream shop analogy. It's perfect, because it's like, is there anything worse than not tasting a flavor, getting it and not liking it, and having to eat the whole thing or not? You can see it in people's eyes when they don't love something that they're drinking. And I don't like that. I don't want that. I don't want someone to sit there and A, not be satisfied, and B, be spending, their good money on something. So it is definitely an investment, because that's a challenge. The language is a challenge. Sometimes what a guest will say doesn't match. The one good example is we find a lot of people asking for full-bodied Pinot Noirs, and maybe there are some, California that have something other than Pinot in them, then we have to parse. Is it the light-bodied wine you're looking for, or the fuller? And then literally the best way is to just plop something in front of them and see how they react. But, there's really nothing better than when you pour a taste and someone's like eyes light up and they've discovered something and they're happy about it. So I think it's certainly an investment, and it's not like every single person who walks in tastes. It's also based on our, if we're super busy, and obviously when we're less busy, it's easier to engage like that. But I think it's really worth the investment to kind of create that connection with the guests and to make sure that what they're having is something they're really excited about.
Absolutely. I mean, part of why I still continue to teach freshman university students on their semester abroad is exactly that. I mean, they fit with your philosophy. They are a blank canvas, a blank slate, if you will. They're pretty much unused to wine. In the US, if they come from America, they aren't old enough to drink wine. And it's really amazing to see that light bulb moment where someone has a sip of something in their mouth that just blows them away and really seduces them into the whole wine world. I love those moments. So it's nice to know that you're making that happen in a way that is realistic, instead of just saying, well, here's the list, here's the notes, and, you can sort of spin the wheel and hopefully you're going to get a bottle you like. That connection of, well, here, let me give you something that I like and you taste it, tell me what you think. I think it's very personal as well. Instructive, but personal.
Yeah, we have a few in terms of like how we actually communicate it too. We try to put what we call call outs on the menu. It's not notes under every wine, and it's not a key for every single wine, but it's when there's something really remarkable, we like to kind of quote unquote call it out. So it kind of, on those days when we don't have as much time to engage, then at least the guests can see something. And we're actually about to relaunch our by the bottle list with, sort of expanded, it's an expanded interaction like that. Because I think we don't want it to be so flat. We want it to have a little bit of life. And like I said, not every single guest you're going to be able to take 10 minutes and taste through 4 wines. So it's like, how do we fill that gap when we can't have that in depth of an interaction? So that's one way we want to do it, sort of by having light information, but not overwhelming on the page.
That's such a good idea. It's appealing. Just a couple of lines is all you need, not a paragraph. So, and if it's your night out, you don't want to sit down and read a Wine Spectator review. So, it's a really great approach. And I think what you are doing is exactly what you set out to do. Creating a really fun and informal, inclusive environment where people don't feel intimidated and they do feel wanted. And that they can try things. I think that's amazing. My next point I want to raise is another amazing thing that Ardesia did, or you did with Ardesia. During the pandemic, you only closed for 48 hours, which is incredible. My brother owns a restaurant in Florida. I know how absolutely difficult that pivot was, but you whipped up ways to run business and keep your employees working. And it's not easy. I mean, it was a hell of a mountain to climb. What did you do? How did you stay open? And you must hopefully have now an undyingly loyal staff, I'm hoping.
Well, it is interesting because I do think it did kind of transform everything for everyone. And I think for us, it was just like one foot in front of the other. And so the real turning point was when in New York State, the government quickly moved to allow us to deliver alcohol, which prior to the pandemic, under the liquor license we hold, you're not allowed to do that. So, I mean, we were cryovacuuming things and throwing food out and giving food away. And we thought we were done. And then that came into play. So then 2 days later, we're like, all right, we're a wine shop now.
That's amazing. I mean, just fast thinking, because it was overwhelming. So, don't be too humble. That was the ability to think fast in a really tough moment.
Yeah, and act. And I have to give credit to, my manager, Jordan, and then we had 2 chefs in the kitchen who we were able to, all of us stayed on, not one sort of gap in employment. Unfortunately, the rest of the staff we did have to furlough, but we stayed in touch. We did a fundraiser, we kind of did everything we could to support, and we kind of went person by person to see what kind of safety net they had. And luckily, there were a lot of safety nets for everyone. But for example, one of our chefs was about to have a baby. His wife was having a baby that April. And so we paid him to stay home because it was, as I'm sure you know, and as it was in Italy, it was just wild. It was just so crazy here and so unknown. And
absolutely, I don't think any of us will ever forget.
No, it's so visceral, even just talking about it. But I think the thing is, with Jordan and I working side by side, we were able to be incredibly nimble. And because we're so small, we didn't have any layers. So as things started opening, then we decided to do a little pop-up. We were very, very fortunate that we have a patio space. So, we just kind of kept building. And so then a couple days later, we opened our pop-up. And then as each, restriction lifted or things changed one way or the other, we would just adapt. And, but then the flip side of it is we're really in a neighborhood. And so there were a lot of people still here, and it really worked together. They were looking for support. They were looking for outlets. There were people we would, in the early days, I remember delivering for someone's anniversary, a kit of cheese and wine, and just getting the note saying thank you so much for doing this. And then we have a lot of friends in the medical profession. We're right down the street from Mount Sinai. A lot of those folks live within blocks of us. So we would deliver care packages to them and just, kind of just kept rolling with it until until things really fully opened. But it was, as I'm sure you know from your brother, just such a challenge to keep having to adapt, and never settling down into a routine, because everything changed every few weeks. And then obviously then things kind of rolled back when we had surges. So yeah, I think the key was just being nimble, being fast, listening to what the community wanted, and then, obviously trying to keep everyone safe. And I always joke that Jordan, my manager, and I, we didn't come within 10 feet of one another for 6 weeks. It was just such a bizarre time. We'd walk in the door separately, had our separate work areas. It was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah, completely. And I think you're being humble with sort of underestimating the amount of empathy and care that you were able to demonstrate, because keeping your business going is one thing, but keeping an eye on your employees and keeping an eye on your neighborhood and responding and reacting to where you see needs is not something that we talk a lot about in our industry. We're always talking about sales and things like that, and that that human empathy and ability to take what you do well at Ardesia and, transform it into something that was really helpful and responsive to your staff and to your neighborhood is pretty huge. I mean, I think you picked up more even than you admit to from Eric Ripper with the whole philanthropy sort of thing. I mean, I know that you're doing a bunch of things outside of Ardesia too now that hopefully, knock on wood, the pandemic is over. But you're paying back. You're doing charitable work with things like the Fizz is Female and City Harvest. So I wanted to ask you a bit about that because I know you took your lead from Eric as you were learning about the industry, and this has clearly stuck with you. So what's going on with your outreach?
I mean, absolutely. I think that lesson that I absorbed from seeing his actions, I think that a restaurant isn't or a bar or whatever, a cafe. It's not like this little island that's isolated. It's part of the fabric of a community. And I think if the pandemic taught us nothing else, taught us many things, but that point was really driven home, because we were questioning, I know nobody knew what was safe to do and should we even be operating? And then when we got that response from the community, it really drove that point home that we aren't separate. We're part of the community. And I think then that is what drives my desire to be really engaged with the community. So, we happen to be in a neighborhood where there is a huge presence of the arts. Just on our block alone, there are 4 different theaters, little, off-Broadway things, community theaters. And so that's been something we've long supported is, when we get a request or schools. We're surrounded by schools and a lot of our clientele are parents. And, we kind of always want to be open to their needs and how we can support. And, City Harvest is just an organization that's near and dear to my heart. Their mission is food rescue, food insecurity, teaching in underserved communities about nutrition. And it's just such a wonderful, wonderful organization. And so over the years, we've done various events and initiatives with them. And they're someone I want to always continue to support. And then the Fizz is Female is a really fun initiative to raise money for breast cancer research that a friend of mine had started. And we did a really fun kind of walk around tasting format. And it's fun to be able to kind of use what we do to then support events that can raise money because it's a win-win. You draw people in, they have a great experience, and then they're kind of more inspired, I think, to open their pocketbooks and wallets. So yeah, it's important.
Absolutely. And when you can provide an event like that in a space that already feels pretty comfortable, I think you encourage people to engage. You clearly love your neighborhood, so you're encouraging more people to love it as well, which is pretty great. It's as I said, it's not something that always happens in our industry, and it's great to see it on scales like this where you're getting recognized for it and you're carrying on sort of empathy first, and that's really, it's inspiring and it's a great role model, I think. So you've already had a busy couple of years, obviously. This year you were a keynote speaker at Women in Wine Leadership Symposium, which hopefully I'll be able to get to for the first time ever this year now that we don't have COVID anymore. And you got recognized, as I said, by wine enthusiasts for their Future 40. So I have got to ask you, what are your passions in the industry right now? What's coming up in the next year or so? You said you hate slow results. What have you got planned?
Yes, I do. But I think, a lot of people always ask, are you going to open another? Are you going to do something else? And I do think, while we don't have specific plans, we would love to expand in some way. And that is certainly driven by the type of people who are part of Ardesia at this point in time. And, I've called out Jordan, my manager, and I think we would love to do more together and create more opportunities for our staff, our longtime staff. But I think also just we're at a really, the pandemic, things felt like a bit on pause. It was really like triage and just making it through. And I finally feel like we can go back a bit to nurturing mode. And so we just launched staff beverage education program, which we're calling the Ardesia Staff Wine Club, which was something we wanted to do for ages. We were kind of working on it just before the pandemic, and it seems crazy to think that it's been on hold that long, but we finally launched. And so I'm really interested to continue nurturing the education platform, providing opportunities, even if someone isn't on the beverage team yet. We make that program open to everyone. And I really love the community outreach. So I think it's really, of course we would love to expand in some way, but in the meantime, I think it's really deepening the ties we've sort of begun, and continuing to nurture our involvement in the community and with developing our team. Those are really things that excite me.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me about this today. I'm sure that our listeners are more than delighted to hear such a great story of experiences in a new business. You haven't been going all that long, just over 10 years at Ardesia, and having had the pandemic in the middle of it, it's nice to hear someone so positive and really quite clearly so truly and genuinely caring about your staff and your clients, not just lurching from crisis to crisis, but actually sort of
right.
taking the challenges and turning them into something that is inspiring and really attractive. So I'm so impressed, and I'm really grateful for the conversation, and such an uplifting one. So as I said, I will hopefully be back to New York soon and love to come and meet you in person.
Please do. Would love to have you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mandy. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, brought to you by the Wine to Wine Business Forum 2022. This year will mark the 9th edition of the forum, to be held on November 7th and 8th, 2022, in Verona, Italy. Remember, tickets are on sale now, so for more information, please visit us at winetowine.net. Guys, I'm Joy Livingston, and I am the producer of the Italian Wine Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are the only wine podcast that has been doing a daily show since the pandemic began. This is a labor of love, and we are committed to bringing you free content every day. Of course, this takes time and effort, not to mention the cost of equipment, production, and editing. We would be grateful for your donations, suggestions, requests, and ideas. For more information on how to get in touch, go to italianwinepodcast.com.